It was jubilation on the streets of Port Harcourt, River State capital, yesterday as residents and indigents were thrown into celebration following the announcement of the end of emergency rule in the state by President Bola Tinubu, who directed suspended Governor Siminalayi Fubara, his deputy, and members of River State House of Assembly to return to their desks effective today. Tinubu had imposed a 6-month emergency rule in River State on March 18, 2025, and had suspended Fubara, his deputy, and members of River State House of Assembly. President Tinubu, in a statement entitled Cessation of the State of Emergency in River State, declared that he decided not to renew the emergency rule based on favorable intelligence reports about the state at his disposal. FCT Minister Nyesom Wike has hailed President Bola Tinubu for restoring democratic governance to River State through the lifting of the emergency rule imposed on the state. Meanwhile, Rivers elders, in a statement signed by its chairman, Chief Ferdinand Alabrabra, said as the state has been restored to democratic governance and advised that everyone should avoid the reoccurrence of the unfortunate circumstances. He urged all stakeholders to embrace the peace and reconciliation that has returned to the state. Moving on to other stories, the Federation Account Allocation Committee, FAC, on Wednesday shared a total sum of 2.225 trillion naira to the 3 tiers of government as the Federation account grossed 3.635 trillion naira in August. Citing a communique issued at the monthly FAC meeting for September, the Director, Information and Public Relations, Federal Ministry of Finance, Mohammed Manga, in a statement said the disbursed 2.225 trillion naira comprised statutory revenue of 1.478 trillion naira, VAT 672.903 billion naira, 32.338 billion naira from electronic money transfer levy, and the sum of 41.284 billion naira from exchange difference. Out of the distributable revenue, the federal government received 810.047 billion naira. The 36 states and local governments received 709.831 billion naira and 522.228 billion naira respectively, while the oil-producing states got 183.012 billion naira as derivation 13% mineral revenue. Cost of collection accounted for 124.839 billion naira, while 1.285 trillion naira was allocated for transfers, intervention, and refunds. The Depot and Petroleum Products Marketers Association of Nigeria, DAPMAN, and the Dangote refinery again clashed yesterday over the allegation of diversion of petroleum products by members of the association and demanded a retraction of the claim in 7 days. DAPMAN said the refinery should provide documented proof of its members diverting products, threatening to take legal action against the refinery if it failed to comply with its position. But in a response last night, the Dangote refinery stated that it was standing by its comments, insisting that any party which feels aggrieved by the contents of the publication is entitled to seek redress through the appropriate legal channels without recourse to any so-called 7-day notice. Dangote had, in a widely advertised statement on Monday, in response to an earlier statement by DAPMAN, accused the association's members of engaging in diversion of petrol from Nigeria to neighboring West African countries. The company added that DAPMAN was the force behind the recent strike action embarked by the Nigerian Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers, NUPENG. Okay. Vimbai, good to see you this morning.
Great to see you as well. Great to be here.
First of all, so many things. Of course, today is resumption day. Governor Siminalayi Fubara, as of 12 midnight today, according to the proclamation by the president, is restored to his constitutional position as governor of River State. Your take on this, as well as the other stories this morning around oil and gas, NUPENG, and Dangote and DAPMAN this time at loggerheads this morning, and of course the largesse of FAC to states and local governments. Your take on this story.
Christmas came early, didn't it? Well, let's begin in River State, where, of course, we have been on this for several months now. Even before the emergency rule, of course, this was a big topic of conversation. But what are the latest developments? The first being that we have it on good authority that the governor is yet to return to the state. That's as of 3 a.m. this morning. We were yet to receive information that he's back in the state. So that's still outstanding. However, we've all read the statement by the president. Several takeaways, but I've categorized them under three themes. The first theme is that I felt that the president did admit institutional failures, because he made reference to the fact that over 40 court cases were instituted from voices of dissent to his proclamation of emergency rule. But when you follow these 40 court cases, you find that most of them were either struck out, transferred to Abuja, or continue to be pending. Now, this is an indictment on our judicial system when you ask yourself, what really is going on? This is an issue that had time sensitivity attached to it. Never mind the fact that it's an issue that also had national security and national economic security tied to it, given the fact that the allegations or the information that led to this emergency rule were that pipeline vandalism was being triggered by a political impasse. So when you look at the urgency, the national importance of these issues, you would think that our judiciary would exercise a degree of haste in ensuring that any case connected to such a critical national issue would be attended to expeditiously. Of course, they say that the case from the PDP governors is still pending, it's still being heard. However, now, of course, it has been overrun by events. And we need to be careful about this precedent that we continue to see being set time and time again through our judiciary of things being overrun by events. We thought that when President Tinubu came in and increased the welfare of the judges, and we saw for the first time a full bench in the Supreme Court, that there would be some changes, but it seems to be business as usual, and that's unfortunate. Now we go to the issue of separation of powers and system of governance. Again, we ask ourselves, is this presidential system that we are currently operating truly working to deepen democracy? We saw, of course, the president reiterated the fact that it was within his constitutional rights to declare the emergency rule, which, of course, then sailed through the National Assembly. And we all remember the contentious way in which that happened. However, the reason why I now speak to the issue of the presidential system is because I want to compare it to the oldest democracy on earth, where we took our presidential system from, which is the United States of America. Now, there's so many things happening in that country right now. However, I'm going to take the example of Donald Trump currently at loggerheads with some of his governors because of the deployment of the National Guard, which is a very similar situation because he insists that there are security infractions in these states, so he needs to send a federal National Task Force, into those states. So it now begs the question, this system that we took from what's supposed to be the oldest democracy on earth, which is supposed to be efficient, which is supposed to represent federalism, is failing to work in the world's oldest state. Those who oppose Donald Trump call him a mini dictator, among many other unfavorable terms. And now the question is, are we expecting with our young democracy for this presidential system to yield anything more fruitful than what we are seeing from a democracy that has been in inception since the 1700s? That's a question we need to ask ourselves. And I think those who continue to advocate for a constitutional amendment, especially with regards to the change of our system of governance, are being vindicated with light to some of the events that we're seeing. Very lastly, the last theme I want to touch on is the issue of psychophancy. Now, psychophancy in that, in all that transpired, there are so many voices that we expected to speak up, but people were afraid to voice their positions. Nobody wanted to speak against Oga. Now, what do we call this? We call this personalist rule. We call this Caesarism. We call it Bonapartism. Now, for me, it's quite instrumental that we call it Caesarism, because if you remember, Julius Caesar was one of those who was the founder, or rather, Caesarism is called after Julius Caesar, and all the calamity that happened around that was in March. The same March where this particular issue, we can say, started when we said, beware the Ides of March to Governor Siminalaya Fubara, in the very same way that was said to Julius Caesar. So very unfortunate. As I hand over to Rufai, the largesse going to the states, The Guardian did a report called Money Illusion, which spoke of the fact that, yes, yes, in nominal terms, we're seeing that this money is much larger in volume, but in real terms, it's not, especially once you factor for inflation, currency devaluation. The governors are actually getting less money than they were getting in 2022, but unfortunately, they still feel that they can spend more because of the nominal value.
All right, thank you so much. Rufai, your take on these stories.
Okay, so a couple of things. Number one, let us learn to call things what they are. What President Tinubu has done with bringing in a state of emergency is dictatorial. It is wrong. It is an aberration to our democracy. President Tinubu himself used to have back and forth with his deputy in Lagos.
His first deputy.
His first deputy in Lagos. So what if Olusegun Obasanjo had said that was against the security of Lagos State and declared a state of emergency and removed him from office? The President Tinubu I know will take all the lawyers in the world and go to court. You see, this was why we admired him in the early 2000s, but we don't know the person again. That's the problem we're having here. This was the same person that fought with Ladoja against the impeachments. This was the same person that fought the might of the federal government as regards local government matters. But he has completely gone 360 against all the things he stood for before. That's what we don't understand again. So what is wrong is wrong. He wrote a statement trying to justify it yesterday, and it didn't make any sense to me. He said, what was the security threat in Rivers? It was just because he had tried to intervene. The first intervention he did was to support Wike, which that didn't work, which we also was going to be political suicide for Fubara. And then when that didn't work, they looked at this option because this was the best option to them. Because they also know, and against the argument they make, that, oh, we're trying to save, you are not saving Fubara. This was the only way you could get power to Wike in a clean way. Because they knew that they could have gone ahead and impeached Fubara, but it would have caused a longer, drawn-out legal battle. So they also weighed the pros and cons. The quickest one for them was state of emergency, which is an aberration. We can't be using, because we have presidential might, to settle political scores. So that means, what it means is that if me and you have a thief now, you're both in government, they will remove one for the other person, and we call this thing a democracy. And that's why till today, the Supreme Court have not speedily heard that case that was filed on the 9th of April this year, till date, by 11 state governors. And a dictator is a dictator. He shows it in his tenet, just like what Trump is doing. I have checked through all the laws. All the laws are against federalizing National Guard. In fact, they will tell you, in the National Defense Act of 1916 and other laws in America, you cannot take, and the president cannot put his hands in affairs of local authorities. What is dictatorial is dictatorial. So I am part of those calling Trump a dictator this morning. And he's a dictator. Let's call him what it is, just like he's trying to stifle the media because things went against him. As regards that man, the truth is, we have gotten to a point where we should say things the way they are. Dangote Refinery is now claiming that man actually wants a subsidy. They want a free rein of 1.5 trillion. By carrying oil through the coastal areas and doing all of that to be able to get their gains. As against the fair market forces. What I will just always advocate is, but both parties have to work together at some point. But at what cost? Because if that man says, oh, the price at which they are buying from Dangote in situ is way expensive, more than the price Dangote is selling to people that are taking the oil out, the fair argument is Dangote has a right to sell cheaper because it needs to be competitive on the foreign market. So it is about them sitting and saying, okay, even if you can't sell to them at the rate it's selling to the foreign market because of competition, and the other day it was just reported that Vitol took some of his oil and some of his oil is in America. I feel proud, Nigerian oil in America. But they will have to sit down and map out a framework. All of this will not be done by accusation and counter-accusation in the media space. As regards the FARC issue, Vimbaya stated it rightly. I saw the article. There's something called the dilution of money. You can't devalue a currency, bring about inflation, bring about a surging level of inflation, even in the cost of materials and the likes. In fact, take for instance, in that report you were talking about, Vimbaya, they were talking about the fact that uptick in cement price has gone over 35%.
Even iron, 40%.
Even iron, 40%. Even labor, close to 50, 60%. And you think that because you are giving them more naira that is already devalued, It will help the state governors gain more. I talk to a lot of these state governors. There are a lot of them that say, Rufai, to do project now is hell. The government keeps complaining. I say, no, we are giving them more money. That's optics. But when you put it down, you lay it bare, cost of materials have gone up. So the money has all best an illusion. But also, the interesting part is, all the promises President Tinubu made has fallen flat on his feet. Tilewa Adebajo released a very interesting report. He'll be coming to speak about the report here today, where he was saying that the government promised us that subsidy savings was going to be plowed into infrastructure and development. The subsidy savings now is what they are using to pay debts, to block the debt loophole. Because from the last budget cycle, debt servicing has increased to about 14 to 16 trillion in this budget, from about what was last budget, which is less than 10 trillion. So you can see the disparity. And at the same time, that's why we are borrowing heavily. We are saying, okay, we've removed subsidy and everything. The economy is all sound now. We are not seeing the savings of the subsidy. We are borrowing heavily. We're about to get to the 100 billion mark of borrowing as we speak today. And there are many encumbrances in the economy, in the state of play of the economy. In fact, people like Tinubu Adebajo are still arguing that why can't the dollar to the naira be 1,000? Because the naira is still overvalued. So despite the fact that we keep saying, oh, the naira stabilized, we've cleared the arbitrage. The arbitrage is no longer there. It's not like the days of before. We abuse Buhari all we can. But the naira is still highly overvalued. A lot of people, through purchasing power parity, through another econometric indices, they are saying the fair value of naira should be about 1,100. In fact, people like Tinubu Adebajo are saying, by their calculation, it should be about 1,000. So there's still a lot going on in the ecosystem as regards the currency display and the state of play on it. And these are the things we're talking about. Are you the floor?
All right, yes, well, I understand the fact that the monies are allocated through fact distribution to state governments and local governments. The truth still remains that when we see that allocation is going to the states, then it gives us an opportunity to hold subnationals to account. I say this because oftentimes when we're looking at infrastructural development or development across the economy and the state of the nation, we look at the presidency and the center. And it's usually thrown back to say that the state governments also have a budget. What are they doing with their budget? We've been looking at the state of the hospital in some states like Kebbi State and Niger State, what's going on in those states. And we ask questions around what the governors are doing. So yes, I understand the fact that the money might be, the value of the money might be eroded by prevailing economic circumstances. However, the truth still remains that the governors have an allocation given to them monthly. And under this administration, it has been consistent. And what we should now begin to ask for is how these monies are spent and what the governors are doing with the money that has been allocated. Beyond that, governors also have the opportunity to be creative with generating, internally generated revenue, attracting investors to their states by providing a viable environment for investors to come in. To what extent are these governors doing it? If you check out some states, the only thing they depend on is FAC allocation monthly. No creativity in the area of how to ensure that their states are viable. No creativity in attracting foreign direct investment. No creativity in even attracting local investment to their states or the creation of jobs and provision of amenities for the state people. So this is also important. I hear it that this money is not enough, it's been eroded, but we also have to take a deeper and a closer look at the accounts of our state governors and even the local governments as well, to see how they are spending the little resources that have been allocated to them, and even much more, how they are looking to increase revenue in their states, since the ones allocated to them from the federal, from the center, is not anywhere near sufficient. I think that's a big question for me this morning. Now, going on to Rivers State, which is perhaps one of the biggest stories this morning in Nigeria today, as a result of its impact or potential impact and precedent that it sets for other states in Nigeria. It almost feels like now governors have to sit tight, misbehave, and you might just get a state of emergency proclaimed in your state by the presidency. It's funny, but if you read the statement from the president yesterday, despite him maintaining the justification for the proclamation of a state of emergency in Rivers State, there's no real justification in that statement. He cited Section 305 of the Constitution, which empowers him to declare a state of emergency in a state of the Federation. And I think you need to have a closer look at the details of that provision, where you cannot find what is going on or what happened in Rivers State 6 months ago to merit a state of emergency declared in the state. And so with the court cases would have been an opportunity to test the Constitution, to test the law as to the interpretation of the Constitution as to whether or not it was legal for the president to have declared a state of emergency in Rivers State. At best, as some people have opined, it might have been it was political instability. And this was further proven by the actions taken by the sole administrator. If you want to look at the 6 months in tenure of the sole administrator, one of his key achievements was the prosecution of the local council elections. That was political at best. What unrest, threat to national security was he able to manage or secure during his time in office? And this gives credence to the talk around that it was really a political impasse between a governor and his predecessor, who happens to be his godfather, and just trying to, settle things in Rivers State. Others have also cited that there are other states in Nigeria who are facing critical security situations. Only look at the Northeast and the Northwest, and you ask, why hasn't a state of emergency been declared in those states? Yes, Rivers is a state that is very important when it comes to revenue for Nigeria, but so with other states. We hear of bandits and terrorists in these northern states who go and they steal resources, other natural resources, and sell them in order to fund their activities. Why have we not taken a closer look at that? And so you can see the dichotomy between both issues, and you can understand why people still maintain that it was not an action to have been taken by the presidency, and at best was a political move. And this does not all go well in the future for democracy. And that's perhaps why the PDP governors took the matter to court. Unfortunately, no court was able to sit on that matter to really give us a clear picture as to what could happen in the future. Would we be shaken to see if another state of emergency will be proclaimed in another state? Beyond this is also, like I mentioned, a look at our constitution and to see the amount of powers given to the presidency. There's a lot of criticism around the fact that the Nigerian presidency is shrouded in almost like a monarchy, where there's a lot of power. I'm glad, Bimba, you talked about the United States of America. I cannot imagine President Trump, despite his disagreement with the state governors to declare a state of emergency or taking over of the structures of the democratic structures of a state and imposing an unelected individual in the state. It beggars belief. So with a lot of democracies around the world, perhaps it's time to tweak the constitution of Nigeria to begin to see how we can reduce the powers of the president of a federation and give more powers to the state and actually be a true federal system of government. Beyond that, I asked the question yesterday, what next for Fubara? What next for the people of Rivers State? There's a lot of thought. There are lots of people who were interviewed in the This Day report of this morning, and I think it's quite important, from the Rivers State elders to former governorship candidates in the state, Tonye Cole, to some business leaders who talk about the fact that Fubara at best would come in to just take orders or might not have enough powers as governor to do a lot for the people of Rivers State. In all honesty, in the last 2 years, they barely had a government. And so the people who have suffered the most as a result of these shenanigans are the people of Rivers themselves, who have not had the opportunity to have a government work for their, for the good of the people. And finally, the PDP. The PDP should face the possibility of a defection. There were talks yesterday about perhaps Fubara now moving to the APC, and this is a key stage for the PDP. Already, with the issues the internal wranglings and issues within the PDP ahead of 2027, they would need to now begin to position themselves as perhaps looking at one state less from their retinue of states currently, shortening. So many things to talk about. I believe that we have a correspondent on ground in Rivers State whom we will be speaking to in the course of today's show to get the feel of the people and also what it seems like or what it looks like in Rivers State this morning. Are people jubilating? Is there joy? Is there joy on the streets? Is there hope that things might begin to work again in Rivers State? We'll find out today in the course of the morning show.